Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Multiverse 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto trained by Shikamaru, Asuma, Jiraiya and Kurenai before this finals part 2? Naruto can take it better since he has stamina and endurance in spades since as you've seen he can outlast and outrun Anbu when needed. If Naruto wasn't the way he was, no one would let him train like he is. Asuma explained and reasoned, making Choji frown and nod. Okay, though still it would be cool to do that even if it's just for during really hard training. Being able to cut the time down for it would be awesome. Though I think Shikamaru would just end up playing shogi with his clones or watching the clouds with someone who can sympathize with him fully. Choji stages with a chuckle while Shikamaru honestly didn't think that idea was all bad. He'd never do it, of course. It'd be too much work to get his reserves high enough that he could make a clone. Arriving at the restaurant, the four saw Ino already at a table relaxing and raised her eyebrow at seeing Naruto. Naruto, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be with your own sensei and teammates? Ino asked and Naruto shrugged. Kakashi ditched me and Sakura to train Sasuke, so I found a different teacher. And I haven't seen or heard from Sakura since the end of the prelims, so I assumed she was busy with her parents or hanging out with you. My other teacher had to handle a mission, so he asked a couple others to help out. Today was Asuma's turn, so I trained with him while playing Shikamaru in shogi by using shadow clones. Naruto stated as they sat down. Isn't that a conflict of interest or cheating? Ino asked with her eyes narrowed and Naruto shook his head before Asuma could answer. No, it's only a conflict of interest if Asuma tells me or Shikamaru what the other is training in. And it's only cheating if I was spying or Shikamaru was spying on the training. Since I was technically with Shikamaru helping the both of us with strategy and patience and Asuma isn't telling either of us what the other is doing when we aren't together, there's no issue. If Shikamaru or I choose to tell the other what we are training in, then it's our own fault if it is used against us later. Naruto stated calmly as he looked at the menu, making the four blink at his intelligent and thought-out answer. There's also the fact it's unlikely Shikamaru and I will end up fighting each other anyway, so there's no real advantage to knowing. Naruto stated, making Choji and Ino raise their eyebrows in curiosity. Why's that? Choji asked and Naruto chuckled. Because for me to be in a position to face Shikamaru, I have to beat Neji, which I will, and then beat either Sasuke or Gaara. Though fighting Gaara is more likely because of Kakashi. For Shikamaru to be in a position to fight me, he'd have to beat either Temari or Dosu and then beat either Kankuro or Shino. Since Shikamaru isn't that highly motivated, my guess is he'll have his first opponent in a spot to be defeated and then give up. The second most likely option is he beats the first opponent just so you and others will give him a break about what he did for the month, and then give up against the next opponent. Naruto stated, having improved his analytical skills by working with Ibiki and clone spamming his reading. It was also for this reason that his mind felt that he was missing something that he should have noticed, but he couldn't for the life of him think of what. He then looked back at the group and saw Ino and Choji blinking owlishly at him. Wow, Naruto really has been working hard since the academy. Choji thought, seeing the change in his friend since their days causing mayhem at the academy. Ino was a different matter entirely. Is this really the same knucklehead that could barely get through the academy? When did he change so much? Ino thought while remembering her first surprise when he beat Kiba. Granted, it wasn't smooth or skillful, but Sasuke's wasn't either. Her second surprise came in him being so angry over what Neji did and then even swearing a blood promise to win against him. It was both cool and kinda romantic when she thought about it. Shaking those thoughts away, they all gave their orders and just talked peacefully. As they ate, Naruto noticed Ino was barely eating anything. Ino, why aren't you actually eating? Naruto asked curiously, since both Jiraiya and the health books he read stated you needed a steady amount of food and nutrients to stay healthy and train. The males groaned slightly. Don't bother, Naruto. We've all tried to talk her into eating more and she won't listen. Asuma stated, making Ino puff her cheeks out and glare. Well, Naruto, I'm on a diet to lose some weight. She stated, only for Naruto to look at her in confusion. Why? You're not fat at all and you can't get much skinnier without harming your body and taking away from how pretty you look now. Naruto stated while making Ino blush a bit at the unintentional compliment. You need to eat and keep your strength up in order to train, since not eating takes away your stamina and will make your body start eating your muscle to keep the nutrient levels up. That can in turn make you vulnerable in a fight and cost you or a teammate their life. If you're worried about gaining weight, then just balance it with hard work training so you'll gain muscle instead of fat. Naruto stated, since it was the truth. I don't want to get bulky or fat though. Ino protested and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Have you seen any kunoichi that are bulky or fat? Naruto asked and Ino opened her mouth before closing, since she really didn't see any kunoichi like that. Actually, all the kunoichi she had seen all had bodies she'd kill for and assets that would make any guy's head turn. Plus they had skill and power to back up their womanly bodies instead of being scrawny or uptight like several civilian women were. See, if you're that worried about it, then why don't you ask some of the veteran kunoichi how they balance food and training? Like Kurenai Yuhi, Anko Mitarashi, or even your own mother. Then you'll have someone to give you advice and help you stay in shape without starving yourself. Naruto stated, making the other three males blink, wondering why the hell they hadn't tried that argument. Ino frowned in thought for a few minutes before she nodded. Alright, I'll do that. Thanks, Naruto. She stated with a smile, which Naruto returned. Asuma merely smiled and shook his head. That kid does it again. Changes someone without fully realizing what he's done. And if my eyes aren't fooling me, I think my blonde student just gained a bit of a crush on my temporary student. Asuma thought while noticing Ino still having a bit of the blush Naruto caused earlier on her face. Asuma could only hope that Ino would take her training seriously now and not be at risk when they took harder missions in the future. Day 6. Naruto was once again within the Hokage office, only this time he had arrived even earlier than the previous 2 days. The reason why was because Hiruzen decided to do something to help Naruto by teaching him politics, economics, diplomacy, and some of the school subjects that Naruto was lacking in. He made a mental note to have a little sit down with the different teachers of the academy. There was a strict policy of just letting a child go through the academy knowing they were struggling with some subjects and then doing nothing to correct it. He knew the head of the academy didn't have an issue with Naruto. The woman had been there a long time, including when the academy once taught the basics of sealing, so she knew fully well the difference between the item sealed and the item holding said seal. Hiruzen had had many meetings where the head had showed various complaints that Hiruzen had to put down from teachers and parents wanting Naruto banned from the academy or at least from being a ninja. It was both infuriating and saddening. The sad part being there were so many stupid people in the village. Anyway, Hiruzen was doing this since, thanks to Naruto's revelation about getting through paperwork, Hiruzen was more relaxed and had more free time. One would think he'd be spending time with Konohamaru, but the boy had started the academy and Hiruzen wasn't going to get in the way of that despite the temptation being there. He wasn't worried about Kono's status getting him any favors or pulled punches since he was sure the teachers knew better. Especially since he made it clear to all the instructors that if they showed favoritism towards Kono in any way, then there would be hell to pay. Back to the point though, Hiruzen could do this since it wasn't showing favoritism, as Naruto wouldn't be using these skills in the finals, so there was no unfair advantage. Even if someone complained, Hiruzen could simply write it off as payment for a service Naruto performed for the Hokage and the village. It also reminded him that he had yet to pay Naruto for that unofficial mission in regards to him not only saving Iruka's life, but also protecting the Forbidden Scroll and capturing a traitor. Even if he wasn't technically a shinobi yet, Naruto had performed 3 services for the village, with 2 being of critical importance. He'd think of some way to repay Naruto later since it was almost time for his next teacher to show up. Naruto, your next teacher will be here soon, so make a batch of clones that can stay here and keep learning while you go train. Hiruzen stated, knowing that Naruto's talent with shadow clones meant he could do multiple trainings at once. Naruto nodded and made 3 clones for each set of work before sitting and relaxing until the door opened. Standing there was Might Guy in his usual attire and his smile. "Ah, Naruto-kun, you're here already. Excellent. You're blazing with flames of youth," Guy stated before exclaiming loud enough that the windows rattled. Yeah, sure. I take it you're helping me with speed and taijutsu?" Naruto asked, making Guy nod with his nice guy pose. "That's right. If I can't help get you into shape within the month, then I shall run around Konoha on my hands for 500 laps. Guy stated with his pose still in place. "Whatever motivates you and makes you stronger, Guy-sensei," Naruto stated, making Guy smile further, if possible, before he led Naruto to the training ground he picked for this. Hiruzen merely watched them go with a foreboding feeling about him. One of the clones saw it and spoke. "Don't worry, Gramps, Guy already promised Jiraiya-sensei that he wouldn't try to put boss in a green spandex suit like him and Lee." The clone stayed, making Hiruzen sigh in relief before he turned to helping the clones. Training Field 52. Guy stood across from Naruto, who decided to forego his jacket since it wouldn't be helpful right now, and looked at him intently. "Alright, now do you have a preference for taijutsu or have learned any taijutsu styles?" Guy asked, and Naruto shook his head, making Guy frown. "I see. Well, the benefit of that is you can learn one style easily since there will be no conflicting stances in your mind." Guy stayed, making Naruto sigh in relief since he thought it was going to be a big problem. "Alright, since Lee and I specialize in the strong fist style, it would be best not to have you learn that right now, as it would put you at a disadvantage against Neji. He's seen myself and Lee training and using it too many times for it to be fully effective." Guy stated, knowing there was nothing wrong about stating an obvious fact like that. "With that in mind, you and I are going to have a spar so I can get a feel for your preferred fighting style and then help you from there," Guy stated, making Naruto nod before taking his own form of ready stance. Later, Guy could honestly say he had never been as out of breath as he was right now. What Naruto lacked in precision, speed, and technique, he made up for with a lot in raw power, determination, and stamina. Not even Lee had as much raw strength and determination when fighting, and that was saying something. Guy knew fully well that Naruto was wearing weights and gravity seals, but still, the way he fought with everything he had and kept going after being knocked down or away was something else. As for the style to train him in, Guy was definitely training him in the strong fist at some point. While the different lotus techniques were probably not going to work for him, the basic style of fighting would fit him perfect, especially with his speed increasing steadily. For now though, there were a couple of styles that would fit Naruto, and one stuck out as the best option for him to increase his skill and help him in the long run. "Alright Naruto, I've seen enough." Guy stayed, making Naruto relax and take some calming breaths. "Naruto isn't even breathing heavily yet and we've been fighting for a good 3 hours. Guy thought before shaking those thoughts away. "I've got a style that should suit your needs both currently and in the future. The only issue is I'm not well versed in it, so I can get you started and help you with it, but can't fully train you in it," Guy stated, making Naruto frown in confusion. "I may be a taijutsu master, Naruto, but that doesn't mean that I've mastered every style there is. It just means that when it comes to taijutsu, I am very hard to defeat and that I've mastered at least one style," Guy stated, seeing Naruto's frown and making Naruto nod. "Now, since I can't fully teach you the style I have in mind, I am going to teach you a style I know very well that can help set the groundwork for the style. The reason being that they are very similar to each other, but one relies more on speed and deflection while the other is pinpoint accuracy and power in the hits," Guy informed and then elaborated on, making Naruto nod again. Good, now the style we will be starting with is the Ichani fighting style, and upon getting the hang of it will set the groundwork for the Wing Chun style that I believe will be of use to you even if it doesn't fully fit your style of fighting. Guy informed, causing Naruto to get a fire in his eyes that told Guy that the boy intended to master them both. Part of Guy actually believed he could too. Alright, let's first get you comfortable in the starting stance. Guy stated as he began instructing Naruto on the different forms of Ichani that he can work towards, as it was based around giving options and different characteristics of fighting for their user. The user also had to be able to endure attacks too, since sometimes the best way to strike an enemy is to let them get a hit in before making them pay for said hit. Wing Chun though was an all-around form of fighting, as it was about quick, precise, accurate strikes while deflecting and reading your opponent's moves quickly and effectively. The user though needed to build up muscle and tolerance around the forearms, since they usually were used for blocking a variety of hits, and a wooden training dummy with multiples arms was used. One user was reported to have taken down 10 highly trained taijutsu users single-handedly all at once. Naruto could honestly say that he was looking forward to the training a great deal. Day 7. Naruto was still a bit sore from his taijutsu training the previous day, but it had been well worth it. Thanks to the shadow clones, he had been able to get the stances they had covered down so he could move into them on reflex. While the clones trained in the stances, Naruto was sparring with Guy and a batch of his own clones to better get acclimated to the way of fighting. As an added bonus, he had his clones remove their weights and seals so he'd have to adapt to fighting opponents that were faster than him. When Guy asked why, Naruto merely informed him that he couldn't take the chance that someone he faced would be faster and not be able to somehow keep up. When Lee fought Gaara, Naruto couldn't follow him at all, so what would happen if Naruto ever fought someone that was as fast or even faster than Lee? The answer: he'd get his kicked 6 ways to Sunday. Hence why he wanted to start training to be able to track, follow, and react to opponents of that speed. Even if he never fully achieved the speed that Lee did, Naruto wanted to be sure he could at least keep up with his eyes and brain so his body could possibly react in time. Guy had agreed and even suggested that next time they trained that he himself would remove his weights and fight Naruto and his clones, while a set of clones would sit off to the side focusing on watching the fight. If they could follow the movements from an observer's point of view, then it would help to follow it from a fighter's point of view. Naruto broke from his thoughts as the door opened and he was surprised that Anko Mitarashi came in with her usual attire. "Come on kid, I got 3 weeks to help whip you into shape and I'm not going to waste a minute of it," Anko stated, making Naruto quickly follow her, leaving a chuckling Hiruzen behind. Naruto was idly surprised as they were back at the Forest of Death. "Listen up kid, I'm gonna be helping you with accuracy, agility, my own style of taijutsu, poisons, quick herbal remedies, and fighting unfairly. We're ninja, that means we sneak in, slit our enemies' throats, and then sneak out. If you want honorable or the like, then become a samurai or challenge someone to an honor duel, otherwise you play and fight to win always," Anko stated, making Naruto nod as he stood straighter. "Good. Now I plan to work you to the bone and I better not hear any whining or complaining about it or I'll send you to the hospital faster than you can say Hokage," Anko stated, and Naruto nodded again with a fierce look in his eyes that actually impressed her. "Okay, first up is agility training, which is easy, you're just gonna have to dodge," she stated with a sickly sweet smile as she started throwing kunai, senbon, and shuriken at Naruto, who yelped before dodging and weaving through the sharp metal instruments of death and pain. The whole time Anko just kept her smile and laughed viciously at him. 3 hours later, Naruto was panting slightly while his clothes were a bit cut up and torn in some areas, as Anko was smiling at him, pleased with both herself and him for doing so well since she didn't draw more than a few drops of blood from him. The few times she didn't throw at him, she'd attack in taijutsu using her flexibility and agility to attack him at different angles. Naruto looked at his clothes and frowned, At this rate I'm going to need a bunch of new clothes. He thought since the training was slowly killing all of his clothing and dwindling it down to near nothing. He broke from his musings as Anko spoke up. Not bad kid, I've seen Jonin do far worse than you did and you didn't even have any real warning. At this rate I'll have you able to dodge almost anything. She stated with a sickly sweet smile that made Naruto sweat drop a bit. However, a thought came to his mind that also reminded him of something concerning Kabuto, Anko-sensei. Naruto started making Anko freeze and look at him in surprise, which confused him. Sensei? Anko asked in confusion and Naruto shrugged. Well, you are teaching me aren't you? Should I not call you sensei? Naruto asked and Anko blinked before shaking her head. No, it's fine, just never had anyone call me that before. Anyway, what did you want? Anko asked and Naruto blinked before speaking. Well, I was just wondering why you have the smell of snakes around you exactly. Is it because of the forest or is it something else? Naruto asked, making Anko stiffen slightly and turn away with a saddened expression. It's because I have the snake summoning contract. Something my bastard of a former teacher let me have before he betrayed me in the village. Why do you ask? Anko stated bitterly before looking at Naruto questioningly with a slight undertone of anger. Well, it's just you're not the first that I smelled the scent of snakes on. There was that creepy guy Orochimaru in the Forest of Death, then the Sound Team, and then another Leaf Shinobi, but I guess it could have been if he was hanging out with you. Naruto stated, making Anko tense a bit at the first mention, narrow her eyes at the second mention, but she was confused on the third. Who was that? Anko asked since she was around a few people but no one ever mentioned smelling of snakes. That guy Kabuto Yakushi. Naruto asked, making Anko frown. I've never met or interacted with the guy. Anko stated, making Naruto frown. Well, if he didn't get the scent from her, then he had to have gotten it from, oh shit. Naruto started thinking before widening his eyes in horror. What is it, kid? Anko asked with a frown. Anko, was your teacher Orochimaru? He asked frantically, making Anko nod. Then we need to get to Gramps now. The village could be in trouble. Naruto stated and Anko frowned before quickly grabbing him and using a shunshin to get to the tower quickly. Hiruzen, of course, was surprised at Naruto and Anko appearing in his office. Anko, Naruto, what's wrong? He asked, seeing Anko looking serious and Naruto looked frantic. Gramps, I think Orochimaru has a spy in the village. Naruto stated, making Hiruzen and Anko stiffen. That's a bold claim, Naruto. Do you know who and have proof? Hiruzen asked and Naruto nodded. His name is Kabuto Yakushi. Ever since I've been working with Ibiki-sensei, I've started going over people I've met to have a read on them inside my head, and something kept sticking out about Kabuto that I couldn't place until I talked to Anko-sensei. Naruto stated, making Hiruzen frown and look at Anko. Apparently the guy smells like snakes, but I've never even met the guy and there are no indigenous snakes in the Forest of Death. Anko stated and Hiruzen frowned further before asking an Anbu to retrieve Ibiki to join them, which he did a few minutes later and was being filled in. That's suspicious, yes, but is there any other evidence? Ibiki asked since they needed to be sure, and all three turned to Naruto. Well, for one, he's taken the Chunin exams 7 times now. Naruto stated, making them widen their eyes in shock since no one took the exams that many times without something being seriously wrong. Ibiki quickly got his file and looked it over. He's right, all 7 times he made it past the second exam and then suddenly just quit, claiming he had no more chakra to go on. It also shows that he's been staying by the hospital and hasn't been out on many missions besides C-rank border patrols. Ibiki stated with a scowl, knowing that this had slipped past his notice and it would be easy for Kabuto to get information out of the village because the Hokage sent him outside it. This is serious. Naruto, what other evidence do you have to further your case? Hiruzen stated, since they needed as much ammo as possible in order to ensure they got the right person. Well, he also had information on native and foreign shinobi like Gaara, but he had detailed information down to how many of each rank mission they had taken. He knew that Gaara had taken B in a rank missions without even getting a scratch. He knew how many missions Lee had been on, who his teammates were, what their specialties were, and everything else too. Naruto stated, making them all look on in shock and horror, since there was no way a genin could access that kind of information without some form of treason occurring. Ibiki, get Kat and her squad and find this boy and his teammates. I want them found, captured, and interrogated, no holds barred. If they can't be captured, then I want them seriously wounded to ensure they can't make it far. If needs be, then eliminate them to keep from reporting to any possible enemies. Hiruzen stated, going into full military mode, making Ibiki nod and was about to leave when Naruto interrupted. Wait, those sound genin. They smelled of snakes too, and I think Sakura mentioned they worked for Orochimaru when they attacked us in the forest. Naruto stated, making them stiffen in fear. If Orochimaru had a village at his beck and call, then there was no telling how much trouble the Leaf could be in. Get them as well, Ibiki, but do it as quietly as possible and do not tell anyone what you are doing or why. If they ask, tell them it's a Hokage mission and to pry is to be tried with treason. Hiruzen stated, knowing this was indeed serious, especially with Jiraiya sending news about Sound having recruited a lot of missing nin and ronin within the past few months. That could only mean Hiruzen's former student was gearing up for something big. Without wasting a moment, Ibiki was gone to carry out his orders while mentally reminding himself to possibly get Naruto placed in the intelligence corps. If he turned out to be correct on this, then he could have saved countless lives for the village. Hiruzen sat back in his chair and sighed. Not for the first time was he feeling his ever-growing age coming upon him. He then looked at the blonde youth in front of him and couldn't help but see his parents at that age overlapping him. This boy, he may have just yet again performed a service for the village greater than anyone but a few in a room would know. If he keeps this up, he may just take this hat from me himself. Hiruzen thought with a happy smile, knowing Naruto was truly shaping into the shinobi he knew he could become. Naruto, if this information turns out to be accurate, you will be well rewarded and compensated for not only protecting Konoha from an outside threat that could be greater than we know, but also for identifying and removing spies that have been able to hide for too long. Hiruzen stated in his Hokage-like tone and presence, making Naruto chuckle while scratching his head in embarrassment. I like you, kid. You ever need anything, let me know. However, don't expect me to take it easy on you any days that I'm still gonna be training you. Anko stated with a sadistic grin, and Naruto merely grinned back. I'd be insulted if you did, Anko-sensei. Naruto stated, making Hiruzen chuckle at the two. He truly hoped he got to live long enough to see how much Naruto would grow. 3 days later, 10th day of training. Naruto was walking with Ibiki and Anko in the TI Tower doing his next bout of training, the practical kind. He was here to try his hand at breaking a prisoner and getting the information from them. His targets were Zaku Abumi, Kin Tsuchi, and Yoroi Akado, the two remaining sound shinobi, as Dosu was found dead the previous day and one of the spies that couldn't get away from the hospital. As for the others, Masumi Tsurugi was dead from a poison that Kankuro had on his puppet's arms, and Kabuto was in the wind, but every available Anbu was on the lookout for him. Ibiki and Anko both had approached the Hokage about having Naruto do it under supervision. When asked why, they explained not only would it be good experience for Naruto, but it would also help him grow as a shinobi. He had already been on a mission where interrogation was needed and had no idea what to do, so what if it happened again? Kakashi clearly wasn't teaching effectively, and where else would Naruto learn? Better that he try his hand at it in a controlled environment than trying first in the field where screwing up can ruin things. If he made a mistake in the normal interrogation, then it was at least fixable thanks to the medics they had on hand and the experienced interrogators and guards. Hiruzen had relented, but he wanted guards and both of them in place should something go wrong. The two agreed before informing Naruto and telling him to think of ways to extract the information himself while giving him what info they had in the three targets. Ibiki and Anko made it clear they weren't going to help him in getting the information and he had to think of the ways to interrogate them himself. He had agreed and spent the previous 2 days thinking of what he could do to them and what would be most effective against each person. Of course, Naruto's main job was to extract information and get details on what Orochimaru was planning, since it wasn't hard to deduce it was going to take place during the finals for the Chunin exams. While breaking one would be enough, there was the likelihood that each only had a piece of the plan, so having the 3 different accounts would help get a better idea of the whole plan. However, regardless of if he failed or not, it was good practical experience for him. He then stopped at a room where Yoroi was tied down to a chair and Ibiki let him in before closing the door. Ibiki and Anko would be watching and making notes of anything that came out, as well as Naruto's methods, since he could be as cruel or kind as he pleased so long as he got the results and didn't cross a specific line. Naruto walked in and pulled a chair in front of Yoroi. Really? Out of everyone in this piece of shit village that they could have sent, they sent the loudmouth ninja wannabe from the Chunin exams. Yoroi mocked before he was forced to turn his head as Naruto backhanded him, making him lose a few teeth. You don't talk unless I ask you a question, Naruto stated coldly as he sat in his chair in front of Yoroi. Now let's make something clear. You're a traitor to my village, which means I have carte blanche to do whatever I please to get you to talk, and I know how to do so while being painful about it, Naruto stated, knowing that he had to be serious and cold right now since the safety of the village was at stake. Now, you're going to answer my questions about what Orochimaru is planning, and before you say you're not going to answer, Naruto stated before stabbing Yoroi in the foot, making him yell in pain. Naruto then placed his hands on the arms of the chair and looked at him. I will get the information from you, whether you decide to cooperate with me right away or not, Naruto stated before Yoroi started chuckling before laughing as he grabbed Naruto's wrists with his hands. Let's see how talkative you are when you don't have any chakra, Yoroi stated with a dark grin, knowing he tried to pull away and thus help Yoroi get free of the chair. His plan was trashed, however, when Naruto started laughing. You think I'm worried about you stealing my chakra? You're mistaken. I have enough chakra that I could stand here all day and not feel tired at all, but I won't need to since you're just going to harm yourself doing this, Naruto stated with a dark smirk, making Yoroi frown in confusion before he screamed as his arms started to feel like they were on fire. What is this? Yoroi screamed in agony and Naruto just smirked. Apparently Kabuto or Orochimaru didn't tell you just who I am, Naruto stated before leaning into his ear. I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Naruto stated, making him stiffen and widen his eyes in horror. My seal slowly puts Kyuubi's chakra into my own to be absorbed and changed into my own, but it takes time to do that and your body isn't accustomed to a Bijuu's chakra. So right now the chakra is slowly eating away at your chakra coils and the pain will only get worse the longer you're draining me, Naruto stated before he grabbed Yoroi's hands when he tried to let go. You don't get off that easily. Looking back on how you acted with your teammates, you were always so careful not to touch them, which leads me to believe you can't control when you start draining chakra and when you stop. So until you tell me everything, I'm just going to hold on and keep letting you drain my chakra, thus letting your coils slowly deteriorate while your body is in agony, Naruto stated, making Yoroi panic as he tried to get free only to scream as the burning reached his shoulders and started to travel down his back. This will end if you tell me everything you know, otherwise I'll hold on to you until the chakra starts getting to your vital areas. Then I'll let go and just leave you in the agony of having your coils burned out while your chakra starts to eat away at your own body and you slowly succumb to a painful, agonizing death with no way to fix it or numb the pain. Naruto stated coldly, and it didn't take more than another minute before Yoroi was spilling his guts about everything he knew about Orochimaru's plan, including his, Masumi's, and Kabuto's roles to play when the time came. When he finished, and swore pleadingly enough that it was all he knew, Naruto released him and left the room. However, no sooner did he close the door did he rush to the nearest trash can and empty his stomach. It felt wrong and somewhat sickening to do that and mean it, but Naruto knew he had to, since part of his career choice was interrogation, assassination, torture, resisting torture, and other dark aspects that civilians were better off not knowing about. He caught his breath as he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Ibiki there holding a handkerchief, which Naruto took and wiped his mouth and face with. First one's always rough. Anyone tells you differently is a liar. Just take it one step at a time and you'll start being able to stomach it better, but you'll never truly be numb to it. Ibiki stated, making Naruto nod before he took a cup of water and splashed his face a bit with it to help him relax a bit. Once he was settled, he was led to Zaku's room while still hearing Yoroi screaming in pain from what the bit of Kyuubi's chakra had already done. Entering the room, he could see Zaku was already in rough shape since his arms couldn't be reattached and the nerve damage was making him be in constant pain. Of course, since being there, he had received no medication for the pain and it was only making him move in the chair more. I see you're settled in nicely. Naruto stated, going to a table where a cloth over an item lay. You, Konoha trash. Zaku snarled before hissing in pain at the movement causing his stumps to hurt. Yeah, save the tough guy act for someone who cares. Let's just cut to the chase of things, shall we? I know you work for Orochimaru, I know he has something planned concerning the finals of the Chunin exams, and I know he sent your team to test Sasuke after getting the curse mark, meaning you were just cannon fodder for him. Naruto stated, bringing the object and cloth with him as he sat in front of Zaku. Now, what I want to know is what he has planned and what he's going to do specifically, since your ally Yoroi didn't have all the specifics, and from what you can hear he wasn't treated nicely before he talked. Naruto stated, making Zaku scowl, but there was some fear in his eyes since he had heard how Yoroi was said to be fearless and had a high tolerance for pain thanks to Kabuto. Do your worst. I don't care if you kill me, I'll never tell you anything. Zulu stated, making Naruto chuckle before laughing. Kill you? Oh no, I'm not going to kill you, that would be too merciful. Naruto stated before looking darkly at Zaku. No, I'm going to use this for some of it. Naruto stated, removing the cloth, making Zaku's eyes widen since it was Dosu's melody arm. You bastard. You killed Dosu. Zaku shouted before grunting as his stumps flared up. No, I didn't. Apparently he had a bone to pick with Suna's Jinchuriki and died because of it. Naruto stated, making Zaku stiffen since he knew who that was. But back to your troubles, we've studied this and know the basic workings. What I'm going to do with it is connect it to your chair so that every time you move it will send a chime that will not only cause excruciating pain, but will make your brain start making the nerve endings flare up, causing greater pain. Naruto stated, making Zaku pale slightly. Then I just want move, you. Zaku shouted and Naruto merely smirked. Who said that was all there was to it? Naruto stated, making Zaku resist the urge to gulp. The whole time this is set up, I'm going to be having one of our specialists cut off the rest of your arms, then your toes, your feet, then your legs, then we'll take your eyes, your nose, and your tongue. But not your ears. Oh no, that wouldn't do. After we stabilize you and ensure you're not going to die of infection or anything, I'm going to have you transported to a town in Fire Country, asking people to take care of you and compensating them. However, the whole time you'll have to hear people talk about that thing, how that thing used to be a person, what happened to that thing to make them that way, what could have happened to that thing, look it's that thing, and so on and so on. I'll have a ninja come by to check and see if you want to talk, and if not, we just move you to a new town where you'll have to hear it all again and again, since I can use this little trinket to make sure you hear every single detail and word spoken about you, but you'll never be able to do anything about it. Then, once you've broken and told me everything, will I be merciful and kill you? But if the info is wrong or becomes useless, then I'll leave you like you are for the rest of your life as you drive yourself mad hearing everything. Naruto threatened, making Zaku pale considerably while looking sick at the thought of that. Needless to say, Zaku quickly spilled his guts, figuratively, as being in prison was better than that. Ibiki took down everything since Anko was, well, I think I'm in love. Anko shouted with hearts in her eyes. What she had witnessed was so cruel, sadistic, and unnecessarily brutal that it made Anko's heart skip a few beats and her body to heat up. She'd definitely be spending time helping Naruto now, if only to see if his stamina related to other matters too. Ibiki merely sweat dropped and kept writing down the information. Right, maybe keep taking the information since we need to know everything, he stated, making her pout before she started writing down things too. Within 10 minutes, Naruto had all that he needed and left Zaku to stare at the melody arm in fear, since it could still be used to inflict some pain just for the hell of it. Now it was Kin's turn, and Naruto had an idea, even if it was a bit unorthodox and maybe a tad perverted. He honestly didn't like to hurt women that couldn't fight back, so he went with the other form of torture. Entering the room, he held down a blush, since unlike the other two, Kin was in her underwear, which were both black and showed her budding figure, and nothing else. The reason being because kunoichi typically had more areas to hide things with than males did. He also idly noted that she was a C cup. Looking up, she snarled at him, already guessing he was her interrogator torturer. I see they made you comfortable, Naruto stated before going and grabbing a tray covered by a cloth before moving to sit in front of Kin. Do your worst, pervert. I can take pain and torture, Kin stayed, making Naruto shrug. Torture will happen, but it's not gonna be painful, Naruto stated, making Kin stiffen and narrow her eyes. You bastard. I'll bite my own tongue off before I let you rape me, Kin stated before she was slapped hard and helped by the throat. Kin looked up and shivered in fear, seeing the dark look in Naruto's eyes as well as them flashing red for a second. Let's make one thing perfectly clear, I do not rape women. Is that clear? Naruto growled out, and Kin mutely nodded her head before Naruto let her go. Good. As for your torture, don't worry, neither myself or anyone else is going to lay a finger on you while I'm interrogating, but you'll still be enjoying it, Naruto stated, making her frown in confusion before Naruto took the cloth off the tray. Those are my bells, Kin exclaimed in shock while seeing there was something else on them that looked like weird scribbled lines. Correction, they were your bells. After examining them and then working out how they operate, I had 2 teachers of mine help me change them to suit the need I have, Naruto stated as he took the bells attached to Sanbon and stabbed them at different spots in the chair before sitting and showing he had ninja wire connected to the bells in his fingers. So what? You're going to put me in a pain illusion? Kin asked, not seeing what the big deal is. Naruto's reply was merely to smirk before he flexed his fingers, causing the bells to jingle. Immediately, Kin jolted in the chair with a squeal as her panties got wet and her nipples hardened. Anko and Ibiki were both surprised at the reaction, since they didn't know what Naruto had planned, just that he did in fact have a plan. What was that? Kin panted as her whole body was hit with a wave of pleasure the moment she heard the bells ring. Oh, with the help of my teachers, I reversed the effects of your bells. Instead of pain, they give pleasure by taking some of my chakra and sending it to your brain via sound waves. It's only hitting you even harder, since it turns out, my chakra is actually a body stimulant close to that of an aphrodisiac, so it has even greater effects on women, Naruto stated as he jingled them again, making Kin release a long moan, and depending how hard I make them jingle in the order, then the various levels of pleasure you receive. Naruto stated as he jingled them again. And how is this torture? Kin asked, panting with a blush on her face. Simple. The bells are also wired so that no matter how much pleasure they give, you'll never be allowed release. Naruto stated, smiling as Kin looked at him in horror. Yup, I can give you as much pleasure as possible, but that not an itch you feel will never go away. Stuck in a perpetual aroused state with no hope of achieving orgasm. Naruto stated, making Kin pale considerably. You bastu. She started before moaning again as Naruto moved the bells. Also, before you go thinking that I'll be affected, the bells have a range limiter applied to them. Nothing outside of a foot radius is affected by them. Meaning I can sit here all day relaxing as the bells ring and you get pushed to the edge of orgasm, but never able to achieve it. Naruto stated as he jingled the bells another 3 times. On the outside, both Ibiki and Anko were shocked at the plan Naruto had created, since both male and female prisoners could be affected by that trick. Kid's going to make our jobs easier than before. Can't wait to see what he cooks up later. Ibiki stated, making Anko nod. Said woman was also in a daze, thinking of the other uses for those bells, specifically the bedroom uses. Whether on the receiving end or not, those bells could be a lot of fun. She also made a note to ask where he got the idea from. After about 5 minutes, Kin was a panting mess. Her panties were completely soaked and her nipples felt like they'd tear through her bra at any second. It didn't help that, whether it was intentional or not, the bells were making her mind picture Naruto actually touching her and making her feel the pleasure. What she didn't know was that the bells weren't doing that at all. It was her own mind doing that, both because she wouldn't mind and because it was trying to justify the pleasure it was receiving. Naruto then stood and walked over to a few water bottles and brought one over. After opening it and taking a drink, he then offered it to Kin, who gladly took several drinks. She knew at the rate her nether regions were going that she was going to be dehydrated soon. Naruto then removed the bottle and capped it, letting Kin take some breaths. Are you ready to talk? Because I can keep doing this for hours. Naruto stated, getting Kin to whimper. Please, no more. I'll talk. Just please let me come. Kin pleaded, since she couldn't fathom suffering this for hours when her body was already in this bad a shape after only minutes. Tell me everything and then I'll let you. Naruto stated, making Kin whimper before she started telling him everything, with Ibiki and Anko taking it down in detail. Once she was done, Naruto nodded and then jingled the bells differently than he had before. The effect was instant as Kin threw her head back and squealed loudly as she came harder than she ever had before in her life, causing her to soak her seat in her underwear. Kin hunched over, gasping and panting from the experience. She almost felt like she was floating during the experience, as it was that pleasurable and satisfying. Well then, besides someone coming in to verify the information you gave us, we're done here. Naruto stated as he stood to leave. Wait. Kin asked breathlessly, making Naruto pause. Please, take me as your slave. She asked, making Naruto stiffen and the 2 senior interrogators to raise their eyebrows in surprise. I know what awaits me, death or imprisonment in an unimaginable hell. I don't want that. The pleasure the bells gave me, my mind saw it as it all coming from you and made up various scenarios for it. Please, I'd rather have the pleasure than the pain, and I've already betrayed my village entirely. Kin stated in a desperate tone as her body wanted a full release instead of just a sensational one. Naruto was silent a long moment before he answered. I can't promise anything. I don't know the laws and procedures concerning this, and I believe the Hokage has a say in it. If it is possible, then I will do it, so long as you actually want it to happen and not just because you're in a haze of lust and pleasure. Naruto stated as he looked back at her before heading for the door. Thank you, Master. Kin stated as Naruto left and found Ibiki and Anko there waiting for him. Naruto merely looked at Ibiki as they walked to deliver their reports to the Hokage. She's not wrong in the fact all that awaits her is a cell in a prison or execution, since she not only joined a traitor's village but also helped a plan to invade the village. While not common nowadays, captured ninja have become slaves either to the ruling authorities or the one who broke them. It was usually used for captured ninja that had bloodlines, a unique skill or trait, or considered extremely talented that offspring from them would benefit the village should they have any. Especially if their owner had a bloodline as well, since that increased the chances of a new bloodline or a child with both. Normally the Hokage has the final say, but usually they allow it for the person that broke them unless a lord or lady requested the person be their slave. Ibiki explained since it was true and Naruto merely nodded. I see. Well, if the Hokage gives permission, then I will offer her the chance when her mind is clearer than it was in there. I don't want to take her in and then have her resent me because it wasn't what she honestly wanted. Naruto stated as he'd take her in if she wanted, but he sure as wasn't going to exploit, force, or use her in any way. He wasn't like Zabuza seeing someone as a tool until they managed to prove themselves enough, and he sure as wasn't going to be like Gato. That's respectable, kid. Just make sure your enemies don't always know that or they may try to take advantage. Ibiki stated since a person could have honor and respect, but you can't let it be the leading forces when in battle, since in their world the only thing that mattered was you won and lived and your enemies lost and died. Granted, there were exceptions, since capturing enemies for information, bounties, hostage exchanges, double agents, spies, etc. were always a good thing to have. They were more key in wartime, but having them in times of peace meant there was a chance of preventing war. Ibiki broke from his musings as Naruto nodded. I know, Ibiki-sensei. Naruto stated, making Ibiki nod as they walked before Anko chimed in. By the way, kid, where did you come up with that torture for kin? Anko asked, and Naruto chuckled slightly while scratching the back of his head. I had help from Jiraiya-sensei and Kurenai-sensei. I had the idea when I heard some women complaining that their partners were torturing them by never letting them finish. I hadn't fully understood what they meant until later, but I figured it out and then asked Jiraiya and Kurenai for help in making the bells able to do that for the genjutsu 2 days ago. Jiraiya made seals and Kurenai helped figure it out for genjutsu related, thus the final product. Naruto stated, making them blink a bit since it was an ingenious way to use the genjutsu since it was bulked up by the seals. Okay, just one more thing, any chance I could get my own set to play with? Anko stated, then asked with a grin, making Naruto and Ibiki sweat drop. I guess, I'd need Jiraiya to make another batch of the bells though. Naruto stated, making Anko grin as they entered the office, seeing Hiruzen and Jiraiya there. The three then lost all relaxation and faced the Hokage seriously. Sir, we have a serious problem. Ibiki stated before they gave the three detailed reports on the matter at hand as well as the situation Naruto just found himself in. By the end of it, Hiruzen looked and felt a decade older. I'm seriously getting way too old for this shit. Hiruzen stated, getting chuckles from the others. You could always hand the hat over to me now, Gramps. Naruto stated with a grin, making Hiruzen chuckle. Sorry Naruto, while you are indeed improving and getting closer to that goal, you are still a ways off from getting the hat. Hiruzen stated, making Naruto pout slightly, getting more chuckles from the group. Hiruzen then straightened himself and grew serious. Regardless, I want all Anbu recalled to the village and heavier patrols. I also will want extra members disguised around the nobles and civilians. Jiraiya, the snake summons will be your primary concern. Hiruzen ordered, going into full Hokage mode. Jiraiya nodded. Got it, but I'd also like to enlist Naruto and his clones in setting up a trap field outside and inside the village. The kid nearly took my head and my arm when I tested him in trap making, and I can only imagine what he'll do if we give him better supplies. Jiraiya stated, making them raise an eyebrow and look at Naruto. Hehe, my pranks kind of gave me an in-depth knowledge of wires, subtlety, intricacy, and layers of attacks. Naruto chuckled slightly, scratching the back of his head. Very well. Naruto, you will have a few days before the finals to set up the outside traps. The inner traps will have to be done during the finals when we can have those not attending moved away from any potential fighting. Jiraiya, you work with him on the layouts since we can have our forces lead the enemy into the traps as well as know how to avoid them. Hiruzen stated, making the two nod before more specifics were discussed. 4 days later. 14th day. Naruto quickly moved his weapon to parry the attack aimed at him by his sparring partner and then quickly pressed the attack back, pushing it into a deadlock. Said opponent was a beautiful woman with purple hair and rust-colored eyes. This was Yugao Azuki, Anbu squad leader and swordswoman of the village and Naruto's sword trainer. While Jiraiya was away, he had stopped in Wave Country and heard about what Naruto had done. However, he also knew about certain traditions and rules the 7 swordsmen lived under. With that in mind, he explained some things to the people of Wave and they gladly helped move the 2 graves to within Wave's borders and had 2 proper headstones crafted and put in place while Jiraiya took the sword to give to Naruto. It was in the written report by Sakura, Tazuna, Kakashi, and Naruto himself that Zabuza stated Naruto had beaten him regardless of if Kakashi had wounded him or Gato's thugs had killed him. Because of this, under tradition and code followed by the 7 swordsmen, the Kubikiribocho belonged to Naruto now. Naruto had objected at first until Jiraiya informed him of the traditions and the fact that someone at any time could just walk up and take the blade. Meaning that Zabuza's blade could end up in the hands of someone who wouldn't respect it like it deserved. Naruto had relented at that and began practicing with it while Jiraiya worked on something to help giving him more options in a fight. Which partly led to the current situation as Jiraiya had a seal engraved into the blade to allow it to shift in size. It could be its large and intimidating Zanbato appearance, or it could shift down to the length of a katana or even further to that of a knife. This was for practicality as well as usage, since if Naruto was in a tight corridor or in close proximity to allies then the sword would be near useless, but if it could change size then he could use it regardless of the setting or situation. The one thing Naruto had requested with the seal was that the weight of it wouldn't change unless he put some chakra into it. He didn't want to risk losing it while in the short version to an enemy, but if the shortened blade still weighed the same then it would be hard for an enemy to steal it. Plus the added bonus of swinging it while light then increasing the weight upon contact would be hard to match and fight off. Which now leads us to here and now with Naruto training, sparring against Yugao when she wasn't on duty. Yugao had been happy to train Naruto since few ninja had a weapon of their own, let alone took up the sword. She also hadn't had an apprentice before, and from the reports the Hokage was getting, she wasn't sure if there was someone better than Naruto to have as an apprentice. The first day she had him perform stances and basic swings before having him do them over and over again till he could do them on near reflex, which wasn't hard because of the shadow clones. After that she started helping him with more advanced attacks and forms leading up to now with them clashing blades on near equal ground. It was nearly equal since Naruto had the strength and speed, but Yugao had the experience, finesse, and mastery of the weapon on her side. As usual though, the battle was proving to be too close for either to get a significant advantage over the other. Yugao could handle his attacks better, but Naruto could power through hers, making them nearly evenly matched since Naruto still had stamina to spare while Yugao would get winded soon. The two finally called it a draw and sat down taking a breather. You've improved a lot, Naruto. To think less than a week ago you could barely handle the sword and now you're fighting me to near equal ground. Yugao stated, though there was more pride than jealousy since Naruto was essentially putting years of hard work into his training through the shadow clones. He just happened to get the payoff faster than people normally did. Thanks, Yugao-sensei. That means a lot, but I couldn't have done it without you. Naruto stated, knowing that it could sting someone's pride a bit to see someone younger rising to their level quickly, but the fact that said person was their student helped ease the blow. How goes your other training? With the event coming up, I haven't had as much time to hear about it. Yugao asked, knowing they weren't supposed to mention the invasion and only call it the event, knowing people would think it was the Chunin exam finals. It's going good. I'm working on cutting water with my wind now under Asuma sensei's teachings, while he also has had me start working on making a cutting edge over weapons. He's also been helping me with strategy and planning by having me play against Shikamaru more. Gai sensei says I'm progressing well with the Ichani fighting style and should be able to start the basics of Wing Chun soon. Kurenai sensei has helped me get my chakra under much better control while also helping me with breaking from genjutsu, and we're trying to find a genjutsu that could fit me better since the basic illusions are still being overloaded when I try them. Ibiki sensei has been helping me grow my knowledge base while also teaching me how to get information both directly and subtly. Anko sensei has been helping me improve my agility, aim, and knowledge of points to hit for pain, death, or incapacitation, as well as escaping traps. Jiraiya sensei has been helping me with strength, speed, sealing, control, patience, and ninjutsu. Naruto stated since it meant a lot that he was getting help from so many people to make him into a better shinobi. Yugao smiled. Well, you'll be making quite the impression during the finals then, won't you? She asked, and he grinned and nodded before they started working again. 1 week later. 21st day of training. Naruto could honestly say the past week could only best be described as busy, as he hadn't done much else besides sleep, eat, plan his traps, and train as much as he could. If one of his teachers wasn't available due to preparation for the finals invasion, then he was refining the different areas further and trying to expand on others. Today though was different. Jiraiya had informed him that he had something special planned, and it wasn't toad summoning. Naruto had done toad summoning 3 days prior and got to know a few of the toads before summoning the boss toad Gamabunta. It took some talking, but Naruto convinced the boss to let him summon the clan on the condition that if he made Chunin then he had to share a drink with Gamabunta. Since then Naruto had been summoning the various toads, but he had summoned Gamakichi and Gamatatsu, the sons of Gamabunta, the most since they were actually around his age and was bonding and working with them the most. Now though he was standing before Jiraiya, who had 3 bags next to him filled with different balls while a bunch of Naruto's clones were working on sealing arts. Alright, now that your control is better and you have some jutsu, I think it's time you learned a technique that my best student created, the Rasengan. Jiraiya stated before forming said ball of energy in his hand, making Naruto look at it analytically. If he had been shown that move before Ibiki began helping him, then Naruto probably would have gone starry-eyed before jumping around asking to learn it. Now though, he was studying it and seeing what he could, which at the moment was chakra swirling and battling itself while contained in the ball shape. Jiraiya smiled seeing Naruto taking the time to analyze the jutsu when shown to see if there were any secrets to be gained from it. It was leaps and bounds beyond how he was 3 weeks ago. Now, this jutsu is a close combat in your face type of jutsu. Jiraiya stated as he slammed the ball into a boulder, destroying it into small pebbles. Naruto merely raised his eyebrows in surprise as Jiraiya turned to face him. Alright, now the first step is rotation. He stated, handing Naruto a water balloon. Your job is to rotate the water to the point that the balloon bursts. Jiraiya stated, taking his own balloon, causing it to instantly explode. Naruto frowned before he held his balloon and focused, causing the balloon to shake and bubble slightly before a couple minutes later the balloon burst. Jiraiya was actually surprised as it took him 3 days to get the first step done, but he also knew that Naruto had way more chakra than he did, so the force wasn't that hard to create for him. Good job, you're doing it much faster than I or my previous student did. Now I want you to keep doing it until you can do it nearly instantly, since your opponent could take advantage of the time it takes you to make the jutsu regardless of how little time it is. So the shorter time the better, since it will give your opponent less time to react. Jiraiya stated, making Naruto nod before he sat down and took the bag of water balloons and got to work. An hour later had Naruto bursting the balloon at 1 second of activating the Charka, which Jiraiya told him was the best they could hope for since it was actually faster than that. The reason being is that it took Naruto a 1/4 second to think to do it, 1/4 to actually do it, 1/4 for Jiraiya to perceive him doing it, and finally 1/4 for Jiraiya to react to it. So in reality, Naruto was getting it done in about half a second despite them not being able to track it faster. Good job, Naruto. Now the next step is power. Jiraiya stated as he took a rubber ball and caused it to burst loudly. This rubber is stronger than the balloons and there's no water to churn and help burst it. Jiraiya stated, handing one to Naruto, who quickly made it pop on one side. I figured this would be a bit easier for you than it was for me, but that's only because you have so much chakra and you're getting the control over it. However, you still have to keep working on it till the whole ball bursts, not just gains a hole. Jiraiya stated, making Naruto nod before he took another and started again. This time he took longer, letting the Charka build up before releasing the control, making the ball burst into pieces. Better, but you can't take the time to build up the power, so keep going. Jiraiya stated as he went to check on the clones' work. Naruto could have used his clones to do this much faster, but when it came to jutsu, he wanted to be able to perform it first before using clones to refine it better. While it may seem naive or silly, Naruto wanted to get control of the jutsu himself rather than let the clones do it. He enjoyed learning and mastering the intricacies of jutsu and using them, and the clones would shorten that. Thus, it took another 4 hours to finally get the ball to explode quickly, and Jiraiya gave Naruto the third step, one of the balloons from step 1 but this time full of air. Step 1 was rotation, step 2 was power, and now step 3 is control. You'll be creating the spiraling and power in the balloon, but you must do it without the balloon bursting, since it means you'll have the sphere going and contained in your hand. This was the hardest step for both me and my student. The way you're progressing should indicate that you'll have it at least close to ready by the end of the day. You'll know you've succeeded when the balloon is shredded while the ball of chakra is still in your hand. Jiraiya stated confidently, making Naruto smile since he enjoyed having a teacher that was confident in his skills and immediately got to work. Just a bit of warning, if the balloon pops, the chakra contained within will be freed and cause a bit of a violent reaction. Jiraiya stated, making Naruto nod as he decided to take it slow. He did it with the others and got the basic concept down before working on decreasing the time it took him to do it. This proved to be the correct course of action, as is 3 hours, and one exploding balloon. Later had Naruto holding the ball of energy with the balloon shredding off of it. Well, that's step 3, now I just gotta do it faster. Naruto mumbled to himself as he took another balloon and began the process again, intent to have the jutsu mastered before the day was done. 10 days later. Final day of training before the finals. Naruto sat in a small courtyard meditating in perfect stillness as 2 of the toads and Jiraiya had instructed. Said 2 toads were Shima and Fukasaku, and they wanted him to learn this as it would help with training he would undergo later on when he was stronger. At the time he was slightly annoyed since his Uzumaki instincts despised sitting still for too long, but he was able to slowly get the time built up to where he could go hours without even twitching a muscle, which had the added bonus of building his patience. The side benefit was also the fact that Jiraiya informed him that meditation could help replace sleep, as the mind could relax along with the body, but your awareness remained, letting you be able to react quickly while feeling rested. At the moment, he had a small army of clones outside the village setting up all of his traps, while each of his teachers was with a regiment of clones making refinements, corrections, or adding something new to help with his training for the future. Jiraiya had put him through the ringer the past month, helping his taijutsu, sealing, control, physical training, jutsu, summoning, patience, meditation, speed, agility, and other areas, pushing him further and further. The Rasengan was by far the best jutsu, in Naruto's opinion, and he had mastered it within a day before he started having his clones working on making it with both hands at the same time, since if he missed with one then he could hit with the other. Jiraiya had also helped him begin working on his other affinities, and Naruto surprised him by making a jutsu for his lightning affinity. The other surprise came in his seals. Not only was he wearing over 500 pounds on each limb and his waist, but he also had the gravity set to 10 times normal. Even with that, he could still move at high Jonin speed when relaxed and Anbu speed when he actually put effort into moving as fast as he could. The toads had helped with control, water release, patience, swordsmanship, staff combat, collaboration jutsu, and taijutsu in the form of the frog kata. However, the latter he was informed couldn't be used to its fullest until later on when he had the training that would be used with meditation and the control he needed. Regardless, even without the training, the frog kata was still dangerous to be hit with. Especially when Naruto worked it into his current styles of combat, making him much more lethal in hand-to-hand combat. Kurenai had helped him with control, some mid to high level genjutsu that he could fully control, noticing signs of seduction, and even making a genjutsu, though he had yet to show her the finished product. He had in turn helped her improve her taijutsu, both to help her and as thanks for everything she had done. Kurenai had thanked him and given him a kiss on the cheek as well. Anko had helped with his accuracy as well as learning to throw Senbon with deadly or incapacitating accuracy. She also covered points to cause pain, death, and incapacitation while helping with his agility, flexibility, and taijutsu. She also showed her own brand of torture techniques and traps, which Naruto took note of to add to his already impressive repertoire of trap makings. With Asuma, he had gotten his wind affinity under control and had made progress to fully mastering it. Naruto had mastered the trenching knives, and Asuma had even surprised him by giving him a unique set that were a little wider and had spikes along the hand guard. Thus they were as much a punching weapon as they were a stabbing and slashing weapon. They were even more versatile as they had a small knife point on top of them as a way to block and stab. Naruto and Shikamaru also benefited from playing each other as they both grew as strategists as well as planning and adapting. Ibiki had made him into an excellent psychoanalyst as well as interrogator that was second only to Ibiki in the ways of torturing the prisoner without physical contact. Ibiki had helped him block out annoyances, taunts, emotions, and anything else that could get in the way during battle and how to deal with the aftermath once it was done. He had also helped heal some of the psychological wounds Naruto had suffered at the hands of the village, since one could only be treated as a nuisance, less than human, something that shouldn't be in the village, or as a threat while being glared at constantly without having some form of wounds to you both psychologically and emotionally. It had actually made Ibiki want to drag half the village in and see how they liked psychological trauma being done to them and not being able to do anything about it. Anyway, Ibiki had also helped him with his method of taking pain and blocking it out, which was actually helping him with some of his taijutsu training, since Guy found another taijutsu that would fit him. Speaking of which, Guy had been happy and excited to train Naruto so extensively, since outside of Lee, he hadn't really trained anyone in taijutsu. Naruto had mastered the Ichani style and had gained the experience to use it through his clones fighting him, more clones, and Guy. Another style that Guy had stated he'd help Naruto with in addition to the strong fist was the iron body style, which was designed for taking hits and lasting through them regardless of how damaging they'd be on others or even resisting damage altogether. It also focused on powerful strikes that could drop an opponent with one hit. In addition to that, through the Ichani style, he had learned parts of the Wing Chun and had used scrolls provided by Guy to fill in the gaps, and was even learning weapons for the two styles. His Ichani training came with staff combat, which helped him with the toads since he learned to use a Sasumata staff from them. He preferred the small pitchfork, trident head than the hammerhead or the wide fork style that was used for pinning pushing. It also had the benefit of being made from a kanabo, so even if he couldn't hit with the head, the shaft would hurt like hell if not kill. It even had a holder ring at the end to allow for increased range and swinging power. Wing Chun also had bow staff combat, but the harder weapon were the butterfly swords. The swords weren't much bigger than the trenching knives, but the thing about them was they could be sheathed together, making it look like one knife blade. The problem with butterfly swords was that they required complete awareness of your body and the blades at all times, and then incredible speed to move and attack while still using the Wing Chun principles with the blades. He had begun to get speed with them, but they weren't comfortable. Jiraiya had helped solve that problem by visiting a local weapon craftsman and making a pair, but instead of the normal large bladed heads, they were a sleeker recurved version for better speed and control. Since the change, Naruto had gotten better with them and was fighting even more efficiently and progressing better. Even Jiraiya and Guy were impressed by what Naruto could do with the blades as he and his clones sparred to get a better handle on them. Even with the weights and gravity, Naruto could still move faster than a few could track with those blades. Speaking of blades, Yugao had turned Naruto into a truly accomplished swordsman, to the point that Yugao was trying her hardest to keep up and at least match him. He had learned different moves for Yugao's style of sword fighting and was quickly getting the hang of the Kubikiribocho in its large form and its knife form. Naruto could also swing at the same speed regardless of the weight the blade had from the seal. This in turn made him dangerous and deadly regardless of the size and weight of the blade. Naruto broke from his reviewing as a voice reached him. "Naruto-sama, it's time for you to come home as you requested," Kin stated, standing in a modest maid outfit that showed off her figure and midriff, yet not so much that she'd look like a. She only wore it in private settings such as in their home or the walled-off yard around said home. Which was another thing. Naruto had gone to Kin 5 days after her interrogation and she still wanted to serve him over the alternative. So after filling out paperwork, Naruto had let Kin choose the methods to show how she would be shown as his slave servant. Apparently she not only had to have a seal upon her to ensure she never betrayed Naruto or Konoha, but she also had to have a physical marking to show that she belonged to Naruto. The choices were a collar choker, a seal tattoo visible, piercings with tags, or any combination of them. Kin chose a choker and belly button piercing, though Anko had talked her into piercings for her as well. Since then, he and Kin has been living in their new accommodations. Said accommodations were the old apartments Naruto lived in, but Hiruzen had bought the place, renovated it, and turned the entire top floor into a penthouse before giving the deed to Naruto under the direction of payment for 3S rank missions integral to village security and safety. Even put the Hokage seal on the paperwork to make it official and unbreakable. Meaning anyone with a problem with his ownership and living arrangements could take their problem and shove it up there since no one would listen. Kin had also helped him with training as she had told him about the different sound-based jutsu and attacks her village had. It had given him some ideas and had a series of clones begin experimenting on it with a few promising results. He'd still need to experiment a bit, but if the early showings were this promising in him, then he'd have some attacks that were unique to him and him alone. Shaking those thoughts away, Naruto stood and smiled at his roommate, servant, since Kin refused not to stay in the penthouse with him. "Thank you, Kin, let's head home. We've got a big day tomorrow," Naruto stated, making her smile and nod as the two walked back to the complex. Tomorrow, Naruto had a tournament and a war to win. And he'd ensure all of his opponents knew his wrath. Deep within Naruto, a certain fox watched with interest.